Hello, and in this video we are going to think about the past, talking about the past and why we choose certain structures to talk about that in English. So first up, we're going to start with a little picture. Okay, so we have this one here, and we can see from the background we have quite a famous landmark. So for me, it's pretty safe to say that I live in Seoul. Okay, so that's still true now. I live in Seoul. Here I am as I look out the window, looking across Seoul. Okay, so I live in Seoul. If we think about this picture, so let's have a look at this. So we could say that I have short hair. Okay, so pretty basic men's haircut, so I have pretty short hair. Okay, let's keep going. So what else is true now? So hopefully you can recognize this logo. So I work at Sogang University, so that's how that's why you're watching this video now, right? Because I work at Sogang University. Okay, and hopefully this is still true when you're watching this video. All right, last thing, so if we have a look at this picture, so I am married. Okay, so all of these things, we know that they are still true now, right? So I live in Seoul, I have short hair, and I work at Sogang University, and I am married. So let's think about the past then, and explaining the past. So if we start with this one here, so hopefully you can recognize some of the writing that's in this section. All right, and if we know this point here, then I think we could safely say that I used to live in Japan. All right, so that was my my gym membership back when I lived in Japan in the early 2000s. Okay, so I live in Seoul now, but I used to live in Japan. All right, let's keep going. So if we look at this one, so I have short hair, but I used to have long hair. So used to have long hair. Okay, now pretty short. All right, next up, if we look at this picture, so let's think about what I'm holding right here. So I'm holding a Canon 5D Mark II, which, you know, not long ago was a pretty amazing camera. So I used to be a camera operator for MTV. So used to say cameraman, right? But these days, camera operator. Okay, so I work at Sogang University, but I used to be a camera operator for MTV. And lastly, we have a look at this one now. So I used to be single. Okay, it's very difficult to show being single in a picture, but we can imagine this time. Okay, so I am married, but I used to be single. And also, if you can see from the picture, I used to have very short hair. Okay, so I live in Seoul, but I used to live in Japan. I have short hair, but I used to have long hair and used to have very short hair. I work at Sogang University, but I used to be a camera operator. And I am married, but I used to be single. Okay, well, after that walk down memory lane, let's think about this question then, quite an important question for us. Let's think about what is the difference between saying I smoked, so just simple past. I smoked, I went, I tried, I had. What's different between that and I used to smoke, or I used to go, or I used to have? Let's think about what is the difference between those things. Okay, just take a moment, have a think. I think the important difference here is with the feeling about it. So simple past, like I smoked, I went, I had, I did. That could be just one time. There's no feeling of repeating, or there's no feeling of doing it multiple times, or that this was for a significant time period. Whereas used to, it has that feeling of a repeated action. It has the feeling that it was for a significant amount of time. So I used to smoke does not have the feeling that it was one weekend or one night that you did it. It has that feeling that it happened several times or over a long amount of time. So used to, we know that it has finished now. Okay, so it's not true now. So this person does not smoke now. And we know it's more than once, and it feels like it was a significant amount of time. So if we want to have that feeling in what we're saying, you will use used to. So I used to smoke, I used to live somewhere, I used to go hiking. It feels like it's a significant amount of time that it was repeated, but it's not true now. So have a look at these examples first. Let's think about how we make a sentence using used to. Okay, so we're going to start with I used to, and then have a look at these examples here and think which are correct and which are not. Okay, so just take a moment, have a think which are correct and which are not. Alright, well hopefully you noticed that these ones are not correct. Okay, so we're not using past tense, or definitely not using future tense. So this is not the past tense. Our past tense is already here, used to. So we already have past tense verb, so we don't need it again. So these ones are not correct. Okay, so we just need a basic verb with no tense on it. So not to be, or not is or are, but using to be. Yeah, so I used to be, I used to go, I used to study. Okay, so this hopefully this one is not correct either. So I hope you are still human. Okay, so we're not using any past tense verbs here. So went or watched, nope, because our past tense is already here. So think about things that you used to do but don't do now. Okay, so again, just take a moment and read these. So think about what you used to do but what you don't do now. Okay, well, obviously everybody is a little bit different, so I can't speak for everybody's experience. However, if you're watching this video, then two things I'm pretty sure are not true is this one, study English language, because by definition, if you're watching this, you are studying English language, and go to university because by definition, if you are watching this video, then you are going to university. But again, notice how all the verbs on here, there's no tense to them. It's just drink, listen, study, read, wear, go, exercise. Okay, so I used to listen to loud music. I used to exercise often. I used to live with my parents. I used to sleep late. So we've looked at how we are making the positive sentences, right? So something that was true but is not true now, or what did happen but does not happen now. So I used to exercise often means now I do not exercise often. Let's think about how we would say the opposite of that. So talking about something which is true now but was not true before, or what happens now but did not happen before. And again, with that feeling of it happens regularly, or it's happening for a significant amount of time. So let's think about making the negative version. So if we're thinking the positive version, so I used to, and I put this D in red here because a very common error is to use this in the negative version. However, please notice there is no D, right? Because the past tense is this part here. Okay, so we already have the past tense, so we don't need two past tense verbs together. So you don't need used to in the negative version. So I didn't used to do something. So what makes this quite difficult is that the pronunciation basically sounds the same. So I used to do, I didn't used to do. It basically sounds the same. Okay, we'll come to that in just a moment. However, let's get some examples. So, for example, I didn't used to smoke means now I smoke. Okay, so I didn't used to smoke, but now I do, in this case. Or she didn't used to make an effort means now she makes an effort, but in the past she did not. So didn't used to make an effort. So that's why with the question, it's the same thing, right? That we already have the negative in the did part of the sentence. So we already have the negative here. Okay, so we don't need it here. So did you used to do something? Like, did you used to go to school? Did you used to eat vegetables? Okay, but we don't need the D in the spelling because past tense is here. Okay, so again, past tense is here. We don't need that D on here. So I didn't used to, did you used to? Okay, so be careful of that spelling. It's a common mistake. So, with our pronunciation for this negative, and in fact for the positive as well, we are going to need our old friend. It's your friend, it's my friend. The schwa, yeah. So that sound. So we can find it in used to. Okay, it's not used to, but used to. So you'll notice that in the actual pronunciation, we're not saying used to. We're saying used to. Okay, so one reason for that is that the t and the t sound, they are made in the same place in the mouth. So do and to, the physical movement is the same. The only difference is using your voice, duh, or not using your voice, t, duh, t, duh, t. So the only difference is voice or no voice. So because they are made in the same place, with the same movement, if you have two of those sounds next to each other, in English, the first sound disappears. It becomes like a stop. So I've put the apostrophe to show the stop. So used to, not used to. Okay, so for the same reason that saying, for example, like cheap perfume, you don't say cheap perfume. So you don't say P twice. The first one disappears and the second one is pronounced. So cheap perfume. Or big guy. So B-I-G, G-U-I, G-U-Y. Don't say big guy. So the first one disappears, becomes a stop. It's called a glottal stop. And you pronounce the second one, so big guy. So in this case, the d and the t sound, because it's the same physical movement, you don't say both. You just say once. So used to. So I used to live in Japan. I used to have short hair. I used to have long hair. Used to. Not used to, but used to. So for this reason, if we're saying the negative version, didn't used to, it actually sounds the same because the D on used was not pronounced anyway. So in the spelling, because it's not there, you don't need to pronounce it anyway. So the positive, I used to, and the negative, I didn't used to, it's pronounced the same, used to. So I used to, I didn't used to. Okay, but we're using that schwa sound, that t, used to. Okay then, let's move on. Okay, so let me give you some examples of this in context if we're talking about things that used to happen but don't happen anymore, or things that didn't used to happen but do happen these days. Let's think about an item of clothing. So let's think about clothes. So for the first half of the 20th century, men used to wear hats everywhere. Okay, so again, listen to that pronunciation as well. So for the first half of the 20th century, men used to wear hats. So men used to wear hats everywhere. So again, listen for that used to. Men used to wear hats. Okay, so not used to wear hats, but used to wear hats. So yeah, wearing a hat, completely normal. In fact, it was more unusual to not wear a hat. If you didn't wear a hat, that was a very strange thing to do. It was like going out without wearing a shirt. So yeah, everyone just wore a hat. It was a completely normal part of men's clothing. So if we have a look at this picture from looking at the style, I'm guessing it's around the late 1930s, early 1940s perhaps. So if we look in this picture, there's actually only one person who's not wearing a hat. So this guy right here. So who knows when the photo was taken? Maybe he had just taken his hat off, but he was certainly the unusual person in this case. So if you notice, everybody's wearing either a kind of trilby or a fedora or a kind of flat cap. Okay, but every single person except this one guy is wearing a hat. So it was so normal, in fact, that in the early 1960s, when JFK was voted in as president, this was kind of an unusual moment. Firstly, he was the first president to give his acceptance speech without wearing a hat. But even if you look around, there's still probably the majority of men here are still wearing hats even now. These kind of top hats that they're wearing. So yeah, it was completely normal. However, these days people only wear hat as a fashion choice, but men used to wear hats everywhere. And before the 1960s, so women didn't used to drink pints of beer. Okay, so again, listen for that pronunciation. So women didn't used to drink pints of beer. In fact, women didn't drink beer much at all, really, not in polite company. So if you look here, that the women are kind of drinking cocktail style drinks or sparkling wine. In fact, this was a very common kind of drink. It's basically wine made out of pears. So it's called perry, but it's kind of wine, but it's been made out of pears rather than made out of grapes. But that kind of changed in the 60s. So women kind of started drinking beer. And then as we got into the kind of early 80s, I would say, then drinking pints. Big glasses of beer became just totally normal. All right, but again, think about that pronunciation. So women didn't used to drink pints of beer. Okay, so this is how we can talk about things that used to happen, that were true but are not true anymore, or how we talk about things that didn't used to happen, okay, but do happen now. All right, so think about it feels much more significant. It feels like it's a repeated action, so it didn't happen once. It wasn't just one time. And it feels like it happened repeatedly or for a significant amount of time. Or with the negative, that now it happens repeatedly, or it happens for a significant amount of time. Okay, so that is used to. All right, thanks for listening. Cheers.